the challenge in the Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Union. Hundreds of alien leaders sat in a circle. The room was vast and cold, filled with a soft blue light. Strange banners of alien empires hung from the walls. Whispers moved like a quiet wind between the seats as they waited for the meeting to begin. Today's topic was serious. The humans. On the center floor stood Counselor Thrix, a tall, thin creature with shimmering silver skin. He raised a long finger and spoke loudly so everyone could hear. "We have gathered to decide," he began, "whether to renew the human quarantine. Their kind is dangerous." At this, a few aliens nodded. Others frowned not, and then a booming laugh broke the silence. Zyrax, warlord of the Drakeshul Empire, stood up. He was massive, twice the size of a normal alien, with dark red scales and burning yellow eyes. His armor clinked as he stepped forward. "Humans? Dangerous?" He scoffed. "They are soft, fragile, weak. You all hide behind stories and fear. I have fought creatures that eat stars. I have crushed armies with my bare hands. But humans? They are nothing." His voice echoed in the chamber. A few aliens shifted uncomfortably, but no one dared to interrupt him. Counselor Thrix shook his head. "Warlord Zyrax," he said calmly, "do not underestimate them. Many before you have made that mistake." And none returned to tell their tale. Zyrax growled. "Nonsense. I have heard your tales, your warnings. But all I see is cowardice. So let me prove it to you all. I will find a human. I will bring him here. And I will show you just how weak they really are." The room fell into silence. A small creature with dozens of eyes whispered, "You will regret this." Zyrax sneered. "I never regret a hunt." Without waiting for approval, Zyrax turned and stormed out of the chamber. His heavy footsteps echoed like thunder. The council members looked at each other, some afraid, some curious. No one tried to stop him. A few days later, Zyrax's giant warship arrived at the edge of a distant star system. His crew, dozens of loyal warriors, stood ready on the bridge. They all wore sharp armor, their weapons shining under the dim light. "Find me a human," Zyrax commanded. "Alive." The crew obeyed. Scanners searched planet after planet until they found a lone human soldier in an abandoned outpost on a rocky moon. "Target located," reported one of the crew. "Isolated, unarmed." Zyrax grinned, his teeth sharp. "Perfect. Prepare the cage." The outpost was silent when Zyrax arrived. Metal walls were cracked and broken, the air thin and cold. Zyrax entered with 5 of his strongest warriors. In the middle of a dark corridor stood the human. He wore a torn uniform, his hands behind his back. His face was calm, his eyes steady. Zyrax walked up to him and growled, "You are coming with me, human." The human didn't move. He didn't speak. He just kept looking at Zyrax, his expression unreadable. "Are you deaf?" Zyrax barked. "You have no choice." The human finally tilted his head slightly and said in a quiet voice, "You really don't know what you're doing, do you?" Zyrax laughed. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I am proving to the galaxy how pathetic you are. They say humans are feared. I say they are weak. And tomorrow, everyone will see it." The human smiled faintly, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was something else. "You wanted fear?" he said. His voice was calm, but carried a strange weight. "I'll show you why humans are feared." For the first time, Zyrax felt something he hadn't felt in many years, a small, strange chill crawling down his back. But he quickly pushed it aside. "Enough talk," he snapped. He waved his hand, and his warriors stepped forward, chaining the human's hands and feet. They pushed him toward the ship. As they walked back, Zyrax kept glancing at the human. He still looked calm, too calm. Even when he was shoved into a high-tech cage and the door locked behind him, he sat down quietly, leaning back against the wall, as if nothing had happened. ZYRAX stood in front of the cage and smirked. "Look at you now," he said. "Trapped, helpless. Tomorrow the council will see for themselves what a joke your species is." The human didn't answer. He just watched Zyrax with those same calm, steady eyes. Then, as Zyrax turned to leave, he heard the human's voice one more time, quiet but clear. "You wanted fear? You'll get it?" Zyrax paused. For just a second, he felt that chill again. But he shook his head and walked away. In the shadows of the cage, the human slowly leaned forward. He glanced at the walls, the floor, the lock on the door. And then, very softly, he smiled again. A smile no one on the ship could see. The hunt had already begun. The Kajedi warship of Zyrax moved silently through the blackness of space, like a predator gliding through deep water. The stars outside were cold and distant, but inside the ship, the air was heavy, almost alive with tension. The human sat alone in his cage, his hands resting on his knees. The cage was no ordinary cell. It was designed to hold the strongest beasts in the galaxy. Thick metal bars pulsed with a blue energy field. Sensors on every corner watched his every move. Zyrax stood outside the cage with his arms folded, staring at the human with a grin. "You look comfortable," Zyrax said. The human didn't reply. He just glanced around the cage, slowly, carefully, as if he was memorizing every inch of it. "You know," Zyrax continued, "this cage has held creatures that could tear through starships. What makes you think you can get out?" Finally, the human spoke, his voice quiet, calm, but sharp enough to cut through the air. "Because," he said, looking straight at Zyrax, "every cage has a door. You just need to find it." Zyrax laughed, but it was forced this time. "You're amusing, human," he said. "Enjoy your final hours. Tomorrow, the council will see what you really are: weak, afraid, broken." The human leaned back against the wall, folding his arms. His eyes never left Zyrax. Zyrax felt that strange chill again. He growled, turned on his heel, and stormed away. When the guards changed shifts, the human opened his eyes. He hadn't moved for hours, but now he was awake, alert. He lowered his head and studied the floor. One of the guards chuckled and said to the other, "Look at him. He thinks he's clever." The human ignored them. He stretched his legs slightly and shifted, his weight testing the floor beneath him. He noticed a faint crack near the corner of the cage, so small that the guards hadn't seen it. He tapped his foot against the crack, feeling the rhythm of the vibrations. His lips moved silently, counting. The guards got bored after a while. One of them leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. The other was watching a small holoscreen. Distracted. The human slowly reached for his belt. Hidden under the buckle was a tiny, sharp shard of metal, something he had stolen from the outpost before they captured him. He slipped it between his fingers and began to work, his movements slow and hidden from the cameras. The energy field around the bars hummed louder when he touched the lock. Sparks jumped, but he didn't stop. His hands moved with precision, knowing exactly which wires to press and which to cut. Minutes passed. The guards didn't notice. Then, click, the energy field flickered for half a second. The human froze, listening. Nothing. He waited until the guard closest to the cage yawned and turned his back. Then, in one smooth motion, the human pressed a hidden switch on the floor. The crack widened, and a thin panel slid open just enough for him to hide the shard again. He sat back down, looking calm and bored. But inside, his heartbeat was steady, focused. He had already learned the first weakness of the cage: Later, Zyrax returned with a group of officers. "Still here?" Zyrax mocked. "Good. I was afraid you'd get lost." The human simply looked at him. "You should enjoy your last night," Zyrax said, "because tomorrow you'll beg me to end it." One of the officers added, "Humans don't last long under pressure. Their minds break, their bodies fail." But the human only smiled faintly. "You should worry about yourselves," he said softly. Zyrax barked a laugh. "We are warriors. What could you possibly do to us? You are alone." The human leaned forward, his eyes cold now. "That's the thing," he whispered. "Humans are always alone, and that's when we're at our best." For a moment, no one spoke. Zyrax narrowed his eyes and turned away. "Keep him locked. No food, no water. Let's see how long he keeps talking big." The officers followed, leaving only 2 guards behind. Hours later, the ship entered a dark nebula. Outside the windows, thick clouds of gas and lightning painted the stars in strange colors. Inside the cage, the human moved again. This time, he lay flat on the floor, reaching quietly into the crack he had found earlier. He pulled out the shard and began cutting into the base of the lock. Quick, practiced movements, always pausing when the guards glanced his way. Then came a sound. Faint, but sharp, like a wire snapping. The guards frowned. "Did you hear that?" The human froze, his hand still holding the shard. He tilted his head and smiled faintly at them. "Must be the ship," he said. "She sounds nervous." The guards exchanged a look and shrugged. A few minutes later, the energy field flickered again, this time longer. The lights above the cage dimmed slightly. The human slipped the shard back into the floor and sat up straight, his hands resting calmly in his lap. When the guards glanced at him again, he was just sitting there, looking bored, but behind his calm eyes, his mind was already planning the next step. On the bridge, Zyrax was watching the cameras. He leaned forward and zoomed in on the human. "Still quiet," one of his officers said, "just sitting there." Zyrax didn't answer. He narrowed his eyes, studying the human's face on the screen. The human sat perfectly still, but for the briefest second, he glanced directly at the camera and smiled. Zyrax froze. Did he just?" one officer stammered. "No," Zyrax growled. But his hands tightened into fists. Far below, in the shadows of the cage, the human closed his eyes and whispered something to himself, words the cameras couldn't catch. And when he opened his eyes again, they were full of something cold and sharp. Not fear, not weakness, something else. He was no longer just waiting. He was hunting. The hunt begins. Lights on the warship dimmed as it drifted through the thick nebula. Lightning flashed outside, lighting up the alien steel corridors in strange, ghostly colors. Zyrax stood on the bridge, his arms crossed, staring at the camera feeds. The human still sat in his cage, head lowered, motionless. "See?" said one officer nervously. "He is harmless, just a man." But Zyrax didn't reply. He was watching closely. On the screen, the human slowly raised his head and stared at the camera. His expression was calm. His eyes seemed to look through the lens, through the wires, right into Zyrax himself. Then he smiled. Just slightly. Zyrax felt that chill again, colder this time, and turned away. "Double the guards," he ordered, "and don't take your eyes off him." Hours passed. The 2 guards outside the cage were half asleep when it happened. A faint spark, barely noticeable, crackled along the cage bars. One guard frowned and tapped the control panel. "That's strange," he murmured. "Energy levels just dropped for a second." "Nebula interference," the other guard said lazily. "Don't worry." But inside the cage, the human's eyes opened. He had been waiting. He moved so fast and so quiet. Neither guard noticed until it was too late. He slipped his hands under the floor panel, pulled out the hidden shard of metal, and jammed it into the lock. There was a sharp click. The energy field sputtered and went out. He stood up. The guards finally looked. "Hey!" "Stop!" one of them shouted. But the human was already moving. He grabbed the first guard's arm through the bars, pulled him forward with surprising strength, and slammed his head against the metal. Before the second guard could react, the human kicked open the cage door, sending it crashing into him. The alien stumbled backward, but the human was already on him, twisting his weapon away and knocking him out. Two guards down. The human crouched low, listening to the ship's sounds. Alarms hadn't gone off yet. He picked up a dropped weapon and a small pouch from one of the guards, then slipped into the shadows of the hallway. On the bridge, Zyrax's officers suddenly noticed something on the screens. "Wait," one of them said, voice shaking. "His cage, it's empty." Zyrax froze. "What?" He roared. The officer rewound the footage, but the cameras only showed the human sitting calmly one moment. And the next, he was gone. No sound, no struggle, just gone. "Lock down the ship," Zyrax barked. "Seal the doors. Find him." Red lights flashed and sirens wailed. Armored guards swarmed through the corridors, but they were already too late. In the darkened lower levels, the human moved like a shadow. He stayed close to the walls, his steps silent, his breathing steady. He could hear them. Boots pounding above him, shouting orders, weapons charging. They thought they were hunting him, but he was already hunting them. He slipped into a maintenance shaft, climbed silently up a ladder, and emerged in a control room where two guards stood watch. They never saw him coming. A flash of motion. One guard dropped silently. The other was knocked unconscious before he could even scream. The human disabled the room's cameras and lights, then took a small panel off the wall and began rewiring the circuits. Sparks flew, and the lights in half, the ship flickered and went out. On the bridge, Zyrax slammed his fist into the console. "Where is he?" he demanded. We can't see him," one officer stammered. "Cameras are offline. Lights are down. He's everywhere," Zyrax growled. "He is one man. Find him." But his officers looked nervous now. They could hear the faint sounds of screens and crashes echoing through the ship. In the dark, the humans struck again and again. One patrol found themselves locked in a storage room. Another group panicked when the lights went out, and their weapons stopped working. One by one, they disappeared. Sometimes they heard a whisper just before it happened. Too loud, too slow, too late. In a hallway near the engine room, a squad of 6 guards moved cautiously. Weapons raised. "Stay close," their leader ordered. "He can't take all of us." But the human was already waiting. He dropped down from the ceiling, landing silently behind the last guard. With precise movements, he took out the last 2 first, quiet, quick, before the others even noticed. Remaining guards spun around, confused, firing wildly into the shadows. But the human was gone. When the lights flickered back on, they found themselves alone in the hallway, their weapons disabled, and their comrades lying unconscious. On the bridge, Zyrax could hear the chaos over the comms. Shouts, screams, silence. What is he doing? One officer whispered. "Zyrax single quotes S jaw tightened. He's breaking us," he said quietly. One piece at a time. Down in the dark corridors, the human crouched over a console, cutting wires and disabling systems. The ship groaned under. His work, lights failing, doors sealing shut, oxygen systems faltering. He moved like he'd done this before. And all the while, he never ran. Never rushed. He hunted. At one point, he paused in the shadows, watching 2 terrified guards run past without seeing him. He smiled faintly. He whispered to himself, "You wanted fear? I'll show you fear." On the bridge, Zyrax finally slammed his fist down and growled, "Enough. Prepare my armor. I'll deal with him myself." But as he spoke, the lights above him flickered, and a faint laugh echoed through the speakers of the ship. Low. "Quiet. Human. You're already too late." The voice said. Zyrax froze. "He's in the system," one officer whispered in horror. Human had not just escaped. He had taken control. Far below, in the dark heart of the ship, the human opened his eyes. The hunt had only just begun, and the predators were now the prey. Fear Spreads the warship floated deep inside the nebula, wrapped in shadows and silent storms. Outside, lightning danced between clouds of gas. Inside, the halls of the ship were quiet. Too quiet, but the quiet was worse than the noise. Zyrax stood on the bridge, fully armored now, his massive claws ready, his yellow eyes glowing with anger. But beneath that anger, something else was growing, something he didn't want to name. Fear. He could hear it too, the whispers, not just in the hallways, but even here, on the bridge. Faint, mocking, human whispers. And the reports kept coming. Another squad missing, an officer said, voice shaking. "How many left?" Zyrax demanded. The officer hesitated. "Less than half, sir." Zyrax growled. In the darkened corridors, the human moved silently. He didn't rush. He didn't even seem tired. His eyes were sharp, scanning every corner. His hands moved with calm precision as he set traps, thin wires stretched across doorways, hidden blades in vents, alarms rewired to sound in empty rooms. Every step he took was deliberate. Every step of theirs was a mistake. A group of guards stumbled through the lower decks, weapons shaking in their hands. Their leader, a young alien with green scales, whispered, "Stay close. He can't get all of us if we..." But then a light overhead flickered, and a shadow moved across the wall. They froze. "Did you see that?" One whispered, "Where is he?" Another said, panicking. And then, from the darkness, a voice, soft, cold, human. "Behind you." They spun around, but no one was there. A wire snapped underfoot. A trap triggered. Smoke filled the corridor, and within seconds the guards were coughing, blind, swinging their weapons wildly. By the time the smoke cleared, they were alone, their weapons gone, their squad scattered, their leader unconscious on the floor with a message scratched into his armor, "Too slow." On the bridge, Zyrax stared at the latest footage. The cameras showed empty halls, flickering lights, faint glimpses of a figure that always vanished when you tried to focus. But one thing was clear. The human wasn't just escaping anymore. He was playing. With them, another squad found themselves in the cargo bay, doors sealed behind them. A single light shone from the ceiling, casting long shadows across the room. On the wall was a message written in dark streaks. "You wanted fear?" Squad's commander swallowed hard. "Where are you?" he shouted. His voice echoed back at him. Faint but clear colon everywhere. And the lights went out. Screams followed. Zyrax began pacing the bridge. "He's just a man," he muttered to himself. Just a man. But his officers weren't so sure anymore. He sees everything we do," one whispered. He knows where we'll go before we go there." Another officer added, "He's not fighting us. He's hunting us." Zyrax roared. "Silence. He is nothing but flesh. When I find him, I will tear him apart." But deep inside, Zyrax could feel the weight of those words pressing on him. He's not fighting us. He's hunting us. In the medical bay, a group of wounded guards huddled together, whispering. "I saw him," one said, eyes wide. He didn't even run. He just looked at me. He took my weapon and gave it back. Another murmured, "He let me go." A third whispered, "He doesn't kill us. He makes us afraid, makes us wish he would kill us." Hours passed. The ship grew colder, darker. The engines groaned under the strain of the nebula. Doors refused to open. Lights failed. Weapons jammed. And always, somewhere in the shadows, the human. They heard his footsteps where no one was. They heard his whisper in rooms that should have been empty. They felt his eyes on them, even when the cameras showed nothing. On the bridge, Zyrax finally slammed his claws into the console. Enough! He roared. His voice carried through the ship. "Human, face me if you dare. No more games." For a long time, silence answered. Then the speakers crackled to life. And the human's calm voice filled every hallway. "No, you're not ready. Not yet." Then the voice faded into laughter. Soft, chilling, human. In the lower decks, the human crouched over another control panel, his hands working fast, cutting wires, rerouting power. He had already locked Zyrax in his own bridge. The doors wouldn't open now without him. He stood up, watching the monitors. The alien crew ran in circles, trapped in their own fear. He whispered to himself, "You wanted fear. Now you're drowning in it." And he moved deeper into the ship. On the bridge, Zyrax's officers looked around at each other. One finally whispered what they were all thinking. "What is he?" But Zyrax didn't answer, because for the first time in his long life, he didn't know. The ship shuddered as if the nebula itself had come alive. Lights flashed, alarms screamed, and Zyrax could feel the fear spreading through his crew like a fire. But even louder than the alarms, louder than the chaos, he could hear it, that quiet human whisper, "I'm still here, and I'm not done yet." The bridge lights flickered, and for just a second, Zyrax thought he saw something move in the corner of the room. A shadow, a figure, gone as quickly as it appeared. But in his mind, he could still feel those eyes on him. Watching, waiting, down below, in the belly of the ship. The human leaned against the wall. He closed his eyes and whispered one last time, "Fear spreads fastest when you let them see themselves." He opened his eyes, calm and cold, and somewhere above him, Zyrax finally understood. This was no longer his ship. It belonged to the human now. Asterisk. The confrontation's warship groaned like a wounded beast as it drifted deeper into the nebula. Outside, storms raged. Inside, fear ruled. The corridors were empty now. The crew hid wherever they could, too afraid to patrol, too afraid to even speak. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound made them flinch. And still, somewhere in the dark, the human hunted. But Zyrax. Zyrax was done hiding. He stood in the center of the bridge, his massive frame covered in heavy black battle armor. Thick plates wrapped around his body. Sharp, glowing claws extended from his hands. His helmet covered his face, leaving only his burning yellow eyes visible through the visor. Behind him, two of his most loyal warriors stood silently, though. They glanced nervously at the door. Zyrax's voice was cold, controlled now. "Seal the bridge," he ordered. The doors slammed shut with a hiss. He turned to his warriors. "We lure him here," he said. "We end this now. No more hiding, no more running. One way or another, this ends tonight." The two warriors nodded, though their hands shook slightly. Zyra X tapped a panel on the wall and spoke into the ship's comms, his voice booming through every hallway. "Human, enough games, enough shadows. You want me? Come and get me. I am waiting." His voice echoed through the empty ship, followed by silence. One of the warriors swallowed hard. Do you think he heard you?" Zyrax didn't answer. He simply stood still, his claws flexing, his breath steady, like deep inside. Something in him wondered, did I just invite a storm I can't stop? Minutes passed. The bridge stayed quiet. Then. The lights flickered. Just once. Then again. Then. The sound of metal scraping across metal came from behind the walls. One of the warriors raised his weapon, pointing it at nothing. He's coming, the other whispered. Then the lights went out completely. Darkness. Dash. A faint whisper floated. Through the bridge, soft but sharp. You called me. The warriors spun around, their weapons shaking. Show yourself. Zyrax roared. Silence. Then. Movement in the shadows. A flicker. In the corner of the room. Then gone. The warriors fired wildly into the dark, bolts of energy lighting up the room for split seconds. But nothing was there. Zyrax stood still, scanning the room. He whispered to himself, he's just a man. Just a man. Then a cold voice, closer now. If you believe that, you've already lost. A loud clang rang out. One of the warriors screamed, his weapon yanked from his hands, his body slammed into the wall with impossible speed. Other turned and fired, but his shot hit only the floor. Then, silence again. Both warriors were gone. Zyrax was alone. His yellow eyes scanned the shadows. Enough hiding, he growled. Fight me. Nothing. Then, a faint laugh. Right behind him. Zyrax spun around, swinging his claws, but they cut only air. A voice came from the darkness, moving around him everywhere at once. You're heavy, slow, loud. You've already lost. I am Zyrax, he roared, warlord of the Drakeshal Empire. I fear nothing. The laugh came again, closer now, sharper. Then why are your hands shaking? Zyrax glanced down. His claws were trembling. He tightened his fists and roared, come out, face me. And finally he did. The human stepped into the faint light, calm, silent, no armor, no helmet, no weapon. Just his steady eyes. Zyrax charged, slashing wildly. His claws ripped through consoles and walls, sparks flying, metal bending, but the human moved aside with ease. Too fast, too quiet, slipping behind Zyrax before he could react. Zyrax swung again, but the human was gone. A voice came from behind him. You're not fighting me. You're fighting yourself. Zyrax turned and swung again, but his claws hit only shadows. The human didn't rush. He moved in close, disarming Zyrax piece by piece. He cut wires on his armor, disabled the claws, crushed his helmet visor. Zyra roared in frustration, his strikes becoming slower, clumsier. Then the human kicked his legs out from under him. The mighty warlord crashed to his knees, his armor sparking, his claws dead, his breath heavy. The human stood over him, still calm, his eyes cold. Fight loud, he said softly. We fight smart. Zyrax looked up at him, his chest heaving. Why? Why don't you kill me? The human crouched down to his level, leaning close. Because fear, he whispered, lives longer than pain. Then he stood, turned, and began walking away. Zyrax stared after him, unable to move, unable to speak. And just before the human disappeared into the shadows again, he glanced back and said one last thing. You wanted fear. Now you wear it. The bridge stayed quiet long after he was gone. Zyrax. The great warlord knelt on the floor, his claws useless, his pride shattered. And somewhere in the dark corridors of the ship, the human kept moving, steady, silent, unstoppable. The Lessenth warship floated at the edge of the nebula now, battered, scarred, and eerily silent. Inside, Zyrax sat alone on the cold metal floor of the bridge, his armor cracked and sparking, his claws broken. He stared at the dark wall ahead, but he wasn't really seeing it. He could still feel those eyes watching him from the shadows dot around him. His officers hid in corners, too afraid to even look at him. Every now and then, the faint sound of footsteps echoed through the ship, but no one knew if it was real or just their imagination. Then, through the thick silence, a soft voice came over the ship's speakers. The human. Your ship is mine. Your fear is yours. And now the voice paused. It's time for everyone else to see. Hours later, the ship finally docked at the Grand Council Station. Thousands of alien leaders gathered in the Great Hall to witness Cyrax's so-called victory. They waited for him to step forward and deliver the human chained, broken, as proof of Drakeshill's strength. But when the warship's ramp lowered, no one stepped out at first. Just silence. Then, slowly, Cyrax emerged, not standing tall like before, but stumbling. His armor was still cracked, his eyes hollow, his claws dragging behind him like dead weight. He stopped at the center of the hall. The counselors stared in shock. Whispers spread like fire. One finally called out, "Warlord Cyrax? Where is the human?" Cyrax looked up at them, and for the first time in his life, his voice shook. He's here, Cyrax whispered. The counselors exchanged confused looks. Another spoke, louder. "Where is your prisoner?" Cyrax's hands tightened into fists. You don't understand," he said, almost to himself. Then, from behind him, a faint sound. Footsteps. The human stepped into the light. No chains, no guards. Just his calm eyes, steady and sharp, scanning the room. The council gasped. Several guards raised their weapons, but the human didn't even flinch. He walked past Cyrax, who lowered his head in shame, and stood in the center of the hall. Silence fell over the room. Then the human spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried through every corner. "You wanted fear." He glanced at Cyrax, then back at the council. "So I showed you." One of the counselors finally found the courage to speak. What are you?" The human tilted his head slightly, as if the question didn't make sense. "We are human," he said simply. "We fight when we should fall. We endure when we should break. And when you come for us," he paused. His eyes swept across the room. "We don't stop until it's over." Another counselor stood, angry now. "But you're just flesh and bone." The human's faint smile returned. "Yes," he said softly, "but it's not the flesh that fights. It's the fire inside it." The counselor sat back down, silent. The human walked to Cyrax and crouched in front of him. "You could have killed me," Cyrax whispered. "You could have killed us all. Why didn't you?" The human stared at him for a moment. Then he said, "Because pain ends. Fear doesn't." He stood up again and addressed the whole council. "You all fear us because you don't understand. You look at us and see weakness. But we are not feared because of strength. We are feared because we refuse to die quietly." His voice grew sharper now, stronger, filling the hall. "We fight when we have nothing left. We stand when we're already broken. And when the dark comes," he glanced around the room, and every alien there felt those eyes on them. "We become the dark." Cyrax fell to his knees, his claws scraping the floor. His voice cracked as he whispered, I understand now." The human finally turned and walked away. No chains, no weapons, no fear. He stopped at the edge of the hall, looking back over his shoulder one last time. His final words were quiet, but they cut through the silence like a blade. "You wanted fear. Now you know why humans are feared." Then he disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind a room full of trembling leaders, a broken warlord, and a lesson they would never forget. The aftermath. The human was gone. No one saw him leave. No one heard a ship No sensors picked him up. One moment he stood in the great council hall, his words still hanging heavy in the air. You wanted fear. Now you know why humans are feared. Next moment, nothing but silence and shadows remained. Zyrax knelt in the center of the floor for a long time. His once proud armor lay in pieces around him. His claws dragged uselessly against the smooth tiles. The council chamber was full of whispers, but no one dared speak too loudly. Finally, Councillor Thrix rose, his silver skin flickering faintly. In the light, he walked slowly toward Zyrax and stood over him. Warlord, Thrix said, look at me. Zyrax lifted his head, his yellow eyes no longer full of fire. They were hollow now. You understand now, don't you? Thrix asked. Quietly, Zyrax nodded slowly. He swallowed hard. They fight in a way we can't. They become something else. Thrix leaned closer. No, not something else, he corrected. They become themselves. That same day, word spread beyond the council hall, across the galaxy, across empires, across the stars. Stories flew like fire through dry grass. On one planet, they said the human escaped from the most secure ship in the fleet without a single weapon. On another, they said he took control of the ship and made the crew destroy themselves. On yet another, they said he never left the shadows. And the mighty Zyrax begged for mercy before him. None of the stories agreed on the details. But they all agreed on one thing. Humans are not to be hunted. In the weeks that followed, the Drakeshul Empire withdrew its warships from human space. Zyrax himself vanished from public life, his once proud name spoken now only in whispers, as a warning. On quiet nights, some of his surviving crew claimed they still heard faint footsteps following them, that they would wake in the dark with the feeling of human eyes watching them from the corners, that they would hear that voice, soft and cold, saying, too slow, too loud, too late. And even though they knew he was gone, none dared look into the dark for long. The council met one last time to debate what to do. Councillor Thrix spoke first. They are dangerous, he said, but not because they are strong. He paused and let his gaze drift around the room. They are dangerous because they endure, because they adapt, because they refuse to stop. Another councillor spoke nervously. Then, what do we tell our people? What do we tell our soldiers? Thrix was quiet for a moment. Then he answered, tell them the truth. That humans are not the strongest in the galaxy. Not the fastest, not the smartest, but if you corner one. He glanced toward the shadows at the edge of the chamber, as though he could still see him standing there. You will never sleep peacefully again. Somewhere far from the council, far from the nebula, on a quiet blue planet, the human sat alone on Rocky Hill. He watched the sun setting, his arms resting on his knees. The breeze moved softly through the grass dot behind him. In the distance, faint lights of cities glowed. He didn't smile, but his eyes were calm. After a long silence, he whispered to himself, they wanted fear. He stood up, stretching slowly, the faintest hint of a grin touching his face. And now, they'll never forget. On the council station, a final record was added to the archives that same day. It was short, just 3 sentences. Human, a species of flesh and bone. Unarmed, outnumbered, outmatched, and still they endure. Recommendation, do not engage. Ever, and so the galaxy learned that fear was not about claws or weapons, not about armies or ships, not about strength at all. It was about a quiet figure in the dark, watching, waiting, never stopping. It was about knowing that no matter how deep you buried them, no matter how tight the cage, no matter how impossible, the odds, a human would always find a way out. And when they did, you would never see them coming. Across the stars, wherever whispers of humans reached, One phrase followed them, spoken softly, as if the very words carried a weight. Too heavy to bear. You wanted fear? Now you know why humans are feared.